Hey everybody, it's Ken from K-Flying the Rail Fans. So I've got a full tour here down here at the Military Aviation Museum at the Goxhill Tower, which is a British built tower. This is the exact one that was out in Britain. One of the founders of this museum gave money and they brought it over here brick by brick. So this was an impromptu tour. Tour guide named Tim, he's a volunteer here at the museum. He took us through and I'm going to show you, so I hope you like it. Okay. So these are the World War I hangars. Back up that way is the main museum. You can walk or drive down here. Let's go check out some 100-year-old planes. Well, as you walk in, you're greeted with a wood frame structure. World War I planes. This is the Fokker DR1. Fokker. I'll take care of this back corner over here. Hey, modern day fire extinguisher, World War I barracks. World War I, the Great War, the war to end all wars. Got this old ambulance. This is right up my alley. I was a medic in the military and ran EMS and fire and civilian. You can walk all over the place here, and you can walk right up to the planes. If you haven't noticed, from the World War I and the World War II, or the Army and the Navy wings. They don't have any ropes around them, so you can walk right up to them. You just can't touch them. And for some reason, I ended up in the back corner, but this looks a lot like the Red Baron. And get out of this little thing here. You can get a better shot of this on the other side. Cat's a jammer. It's like a maze trying to figure this out here. Fokker DR1. Kind of stuck in the middle here. Let me see if I can get the symbols up on the top here. The Sopwith 1.5 strutter. This right here is the Fokker D7. Germany. '17.
You guys see the Blue Angels fly through? No, they're flying through? Yeah, they were flying around here for about 2 to 3 minutes and it's a while. They're out there in the beach. Yeah, well, they said that they're flying at 3 o'clock. Yeah, I won't be out that way.
Make sure you all get down here to see this if you're ever in Virginia Beach.
This is the Goxhill Watch Office, which is what the British call a control tower. This was built in Goxhill, England, which is in Lincolnshire, and I'll be able to show it to you on a map when we get in there. Before the Second World War started, Britain knew they were going to get involved in a fight with the Nazis, so they started building military bases all over the country. Naval bases, army bases, air bases. One of those air bases was a bomber base at Goxhill, England, and this control tower was built there. Now it turned out that they overshot on their building. They had more airfields than they had bombers or crews. So they didn't really use Goxhill for much. A few things here and there, but not anything noteworthy. Then the United States gets involved in the war. Goxhill is the first airfield given to the United States for our use as we come over to take the war to the Nazis. We used Goxhill as a training base. It was a little out of the way of where we were going to be putting operational bases. But our pilots were trained really well, but they needed 2 new things. First of all, was navigation in Europe. They learned to navigate in training bases between Indiana and the Rocky Mountains. all the farms there are big and they're square, the roads are straight, and you can follow railroads forever. They'll lead you to a town someplace. Not so in Europe. Ancient farms have been divided, subdivided, re-subdivided over millennia. They're small, they're irregularly shaped. It's difficult to see the roads. The railroads don't even necessarily run that straight. So they had to relearn how to navigate in Europe. They also had to learn European weather because it's very different from Midwest and Western United States. So they would spend 30, 60, maybe 90 days at Goxhill before they then went on to their operational units. Now this is the actual control tower. It was about to fall down when our museum founder went over there and said, "Hey, let me write you a check. Here's some money. I'll take it off your hands." And it was taken apart brick by brick and brought and rebuilt here. Now, when we were rebuilding it, one of the things we had to really worry about was the windows. There were no windows. There were a couple of the frames, but there was no glass. They had all been taken out by vandals, and the whole thing was a mess. And we thought, if we go to an American window company, they're going to try to sell us vinyl sash, triple pane, argon-filled, Wi-Fi enabled windows with Alexa. And we wanted single pane steel casement windows. Turns out that the company that made the windows originally was still in business. And they had the plans for the windows. And they said, "Oh, what model tower do you have?" There were three different models that were built, and we told them. They said, "Yeah, okay, yeah, we got those plans right here." And they built a new set for us. Now, before we go in, two things I want to point out. One thing I can't see. But if you look up as we walk along, on the front corner of the roof, there's a concrete pillar. There's actually two of those, one on the other side. Those will come into play when we get inside. And behind those wooden screens are one of the two changes we made to the tower. That's air conditioning. In Britain, this would be a hot summer day. Well, here in Virginia, after this summer, this is a cold snap. That's why I'm wearing long pants. So we put in air conditioning because we also want to keep the humidity down and maintain the integrity of everything on the inside. The second thing is the steps. And I forgot to ask, does anybody have any problems ascending stairs? Okay. The steps, we made those 6 inches wider than the originals. That's about the width of a dollar bill. And so you'll see as you go up, they're narrow steps. So follow me, and let's go to England, 1942.
England, 1942. We need our passport card.
Nah, I've got all your visas, not a problem. We'll talk about the big plane when we come back out.
So did they number the bricks so they knew exactly where they went?
No, they did not. A lot of the bricks. Come on in, folks. While they were taking this building apart, what they discovered was they were building things so quickly they didn't use mortar to hold the bricks together. They used concrete. And so a lot of the bricks broke when we were taking the building apart. They had to be replaced. And so they weren't placed in any particular order. And we had new bricks built, which were going to be sturdier anyway. And those were laid at the very bottom. That put them underneath this stucco portion, which is an original part. So it hid them because, so they, that's a recording from upstairs. It's not actually a plane tape. So, yeah, when we came out of Cottbus, there was a pile of bricks about 150 feet ahead of us, and that was all of the broken bricks from here. So the reason I wanted to bring you in here to an incomplete restoration route, this will be the American control room once we get it complete, is because of this poster, just like the one over in Goxhill, or Cottbus. This is what this building looked like when our founder acquired it. As you can see, no windows. Everything's falling apart. But these pictures up here, these pictures down here, that is what Goxhill looked like when it was being used by the United States Army Air Forces during World War II. And this pilot here is standing right up there, and we'll see that when we go upstairs. And it's not a recreation, it is, this guy is actually standing on that deck. Now, where we're going to go next is around the corner here.
Yeah, that's what they look like. I'll show you a couple of when I find them. There's several of those still standing. Different rockets, different bases. Those are single rockets.
Okay, so this is the forecast room, or the meteorology office, the weather office, whatever you want to call it. Forecast room was what the British called it. Weather was extremely important during World War II for the Air Force because the planes couldn't fly in heavy weather. So we had to know when it was going to rain and snow and storm and stuff like that. So every base in the United Kingdom, every base that the United States and Britain had their own weather office. The US 8th Air Force had the 18th Weather Squadron, and a detachment from the 18th Weather was here at Goxhill. And that detachment had 3 officers and 8 enlisted women. Apparently, measuring temperatures and humidity was something women were allowed to do in the 1940s. Now, every day, every hour, the weather folks would measure the temperature, barometric pressure, relative humidity, wind speed and direction at ground level. And they would record it. And 5 or 6 times a day, they would go up onto the roof and release a weather balloon. And those concrete pillars I talked about up there, they would put one of these devices called a theodolite on those posts, and they would track the balloon from those 2 theodolites, which are very precisely calibrated instruments. And by tracking it, you could tell wind speed and direction at different altitudes. All of that information is collated and sent back to headquarters. And they had to send it via teletype or telephone. They couldn't send it over the radio because they didn't want the Nazis to know what their weather was going to be like tomorrow. So all the communications in Britain was done over copper wire, telephone, telegraph, teletype. It was so important to keep it quiet that in the country of Britain, less than a third the size of Texas, there were 322,000 miles of communication cable buried. That's going to the moon and halfway back. So now, where is Goxhill? This map is fading rapidly here. Let's give you a bit of a lesson here in geography. Here is the English Channel. This is the United Kingdom here. English Channel separating it from continental Europe. This right here, the Strait of Dover is 21 miles wide, to give you some sense of scale. This is London. Goxhill is right here. Now, many of you who came in got briefed by a little British lady.
Yeah.
She is from this island here in the Irish Sea. It's called the Isle of Man. If you've heard of Manx cats, the cats with no tails, that's where they're from. Sheila also does not have a tail. I'm her husband, I've checked, she doesn't have a tail. Now, the other thing about the Isle of Man is I've been there, beautiful, beautiful place. The cats have no tails, and the women are all beautiful and all have questionable taste in men. I've met my brother-in-law and his wife and their daughters, and trust me, beautiful, questionable taste in men. So, where we're going to go next, oh actually, right around the corner here, I'm going to talk about these buckets. This is Goxhill's fire plant. Every building in Britain during World War II, including residences, had to have at least one bucket of at least 3 gallons capacity filled with water or sand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because when the Nazis come over bombing, they don't just drop one bomb, they drop a string of bombs, and they don't travel alone, they travel in formations. So it may be a while before the fire brigade gets to you. And it's important to put out a fire as soon as you can, because an interior fire in a house or other building will double in size every 60 seconds. And they used a lot of incendiary bombs to start fires. They didn't blow up, they just burned really hot. And so that's why they used sand, because putting water on an incendiary would sometimes make it worse. Like if it was phosphorus, it would blow up. So put sand on it, it smothers it. Now, Goxhill had more than one because it's a military target. But this bucket here comes from Buckingham Palace. This is the royal seal of Queen Elizabeth's father, George VI. G.R. George Rex, King George, and then V.I. in the middle, 6. King George VI. So, how did it get here from Buckingham Palace? Okay, so where we're going to go next is upstairs. So we're going to take a look at a completed control room. It's the British control room. Now, before we get up there, 2 things. One, remember that we made those stairs wider than the originals. And secondly, when Goxhill was transferred from the British to the Americans, General Eisenhower himself accepted the transfer. Legend has it, he had to use the bathroom while he was here. So if you have ever wanted to see a urinal used by a future president of the United States, now's your chance. It's on the left just before we go up the stairs. Something for you to cross off your bucket list.
It may take a few minutes on the steps.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
I want to get a shot of that. I'll get a shot of that real quick.
Oh, go ahead.
We're gonna go the steps a little slow. Yeah.
Launch one of those rockets, tell them what plane to launch.
You can see this in the car.
He's on, we watched it the first time.
Okay.
Urinal used by Eisenhower.
Yeah. Huh.
It's just basically a smoke trail.
Yeah, that helps. But I can't go one foot at the other. I have to-
British.
not very good, son.
That would not be good.
Turkey vulture.
It's a vulture. Okay, so this is the control room, as the British would have used it. What you will not find in here is many radios. 2 of them. These 2 candlesticks are the microphones for the radios. Everything else in here is a telephone. You did all of your communication by telephone, like I said downstairs, but how do you talk to an airplane in the days before cell phones when you needed to tell them it's time to go? You don't want to get on the radio and say, all right, boys, start them up. Let's go bomb the Nazis. Because they'll hear you.
Right.
And so they'll be waiting for you. So what they would do, everybody got briefed as to when they were going to be taking off, and they'd get into their planes and pre-flight their planes, and when it was time for them to start up, one of the controllers would load a certain color flare in this gun, step out on the deck, and fire it off.
Wow.
When it was time to taxi into place, they would fire another one, and then when it's time to take off, they would fire a third. Now, that pilot I showed you on that poster downstairs, right here, he was standing right here when that picture was taken. Here's the doors to get out. There's one on either side. And that's where he was standing. Now, none of this stuff was in here when we got the tower. It was empty. But a lot of people donated period-appropriate stuff. The desk, however, 2 of our volunteers built based on that picture on that poster right there. That's a wartime propaganda poster. How do we know that it's propaganda? One word: lighting. Now, the British flew at night. All of their bombers flew at night. So did the Germans. So there were strict blackouts. And everything every building had blackout curtains. Now, if we can keep out the Virginia summertime sun like this, it's easy to keep out dull lighting. Now, what you don't see in that picture is dull lighting. They needed to have bright lights for the picture. You also notice there's an officer standing out on the deck who's being uplit. And the blackout curtains are open. So they probably set this up, turned on the lights, took all the pictures, shut everything back down, and got back inside. But because of that picture, we got the right size and dimensions for this particular desk. Now, this landing control board, what we would now call accountability. Each aircraft had a squadron code on it, LG, and then each individual aircraft had its own letter. Generally, A was for the squadron leader, B for his deputy. Excuse me. And then the rest of them had a letter assigned to them. So here we see that D for dog went airborne at 2 a.m. F for foxtrot received orders at 8 p.m. R for Robert landed wherever they happened to be landing. The time wasn't important, just to note that it had landed. The pilot landed and called back and said, "I'm here." And this is how they kept track of their squadrons. High tech. And so, you know, if a guy gets lost or crashes, they don't know until he's overdue by a certain amount of time at his landing point. So, there was a lot of unknowns in aerial operations during World War II. And where we're going to go next is the room over to the right there.
that picture that he was talking about.
Okay, so this is what would be the signals office, and all of the communication equipment would be in here. The telegraphs, teletypes, all of the transmitting equipment, the few radios that they had, they would be in here. We have zero hope of collecting all of that equipment. We have a picture on the poster there of a different museum of what it would have looked like. So what we did is we turned this into a slice of life for the average Briton during World War II. We have the typical posters: recruiting, war bond drives, loose lip sink ships type of stuff. Over in the corner over there, we've got the various helmets that civilians would wear in their wartime roles. FAP stands for First Aid Party. SFP is Street Fighter Party. Everybody would get together with their buckets and form bucket brigades. The Red Cross is obvious. The white helmet with the W on it, that's an air raid warden. They were the people who were in charge of enforcing the blackout. If they saw light coming from a house, they'd go and, boy, you need to close those drapes, mate. Otherwise, we're taking you in. I just did my best Australian accent, sorry. I was doing an Australian accent with one of our summer schools a couple weeks ago. Now I can't get out of that mode. And they actually had the power to haul people in under arrest if they didn't comply with the blackout orders. It was also their job to ensure that people got in a safe and orderly fashion to the nearest bomb shelter during an air raid. Now, during the First World War, 1914 to 1918, both sides used poison gas on each other. But it was soldiers gassing other soldiers at the front in the combat zones. It was a really nasty, sometimes effective weapon, sometimes blew back in your face and killed your own troops. But what happened is, during the Second World War, the Nazis developed the ability to bomb any place in Great Britain that they wanted to. And that meant they could drop poison gas wherever they wanted to. This was a big fear. The Nazis were pretty ruthless. They didn't care about the lives of the people in the territories they were conquering. So poison gas attacks were a very real fear. Everybody had a gas mask. Now over here, in this display, we have the standard issue adult gas mask. But it wasn't just the adults. Children had gas masks. We have two of them here. In this picture, horses had gas masks. They were still really important modes of transportation. And infants had gas masks. You would put the baby in so that you could see their face through the window and cinched the canvas tight. It's chemically impervious. And working this bellow, you moved air through a filter into the baby. Now this is a nurse with an infant. She's wearing her gas mask and keeping the kid alive in his or hers. This was a persistent fear from 1939 to 1945. Nobody knows why Hitler didn't use gas on Britain. He certainly wasn't afraid of using it on 6 million Jews and 8 million other people in the concentration camps. Now, not using it at the front was an important thing. The reason they didn't do it is because they would have gassed the horses, and they couldn't afford to lose the horses. But why they didn't drop it over the civilian population, nobody knows. The only theory that seems to be the most popular amongst historians is Hitler himself was gassed during World War I. He was in the trenches, he got gassed, spent weeks recovering from the gas attack, and he watched a lot of his comrades dying. That may have had something to do with it, but nobody knows absolutely for certain.
I heard Hitler manufactured methamphetamine in those days, and I heard that they were all addicts. I watched documentaries on that about a couple, 3 or 4 years ago. It's pretty amazing how.
Well, we give our pilots amphetamines in combat situations. Amphetamines, when used properly, are very good at what they do, keeping you alert, keeping you sharp, giving you fast reactions. And they gave a lot of amphetamines to their troops. But they had the capacity to make poison gas, and they didn't. Now, one thing, this is the 1940s. There are no cell phones. There are no pagers. Few people have telephones. Those that do, they're party lines where several different households are using the same line. Not everybody has a radio. Nobody has a television yet. It's just invented in 1937, I think. So how do you let everybody know that there's an air raid coming? You use a siren. They would have several of these per square mile. These could be heard for up to 2 miles, but every square mile would have at least 5 of these. And that redundancy helped make sure that the warnings went out. Now, there is an air raid coming, and the bombers are headed straight to Goxhill. And you, sir, need to help me warn everybody that there's an air raid coming. Grab a hold and crank until I give you a thumbs up. When everybody closes their ears, that's when I know it's time to stop. That's what air raid sirens sounded like. They were triggered electronically, but they also had manual controls in case something happened to the power supply. These would sound in a solid tone for 2 minutes to let you know that there was an air raid coming. When the all clear was sounded, they would be in an up and down tone like a police siren for 1 minute. Now, the one thing that they never heard, and they were kind of glad that they didn't, was this. A strangling duck.
Yeah. Is that thing hard to turn?
Not very.
It looked like he was having a hard time turning it.
So. This is warning for a gas attack. Now again, they never heard it, nobody knows why, but they were ready for it. So that is what I have got for the Goxhill Control Tower Watch Office, whichever term you prefer to use. Anybody have any last questions, comments, or rude gestures? No? Okay, well thanks for coming. And I know some of you have heard this already, but our advertisement is largely word of mouth, so if you would be so kind, and if you are so inclined to put in a good word for us on TripAdvisor or Yelp, we would appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the tour, my name is Tim. If you didn't, my name is Dave.
Shift back in here. Infant. That's what they put infants into. Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Going down is easier than going up. Yeah.
You saw me videotape and everything. Do you mind if I throw it on? subscribers, so
All right,
they're gonna word of mouth.
definitely appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you. I want to show you guys a picture that he was talking about. I zoomed in on a little bit, showing that captain on the upstairs of that pilot. There's that pilot that he was talking about standing right outside the window. But again, that was Tim. If you guys want to come here, donate, you take donations, come on in. Thank you very much, Tim.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
How you doing? Okay, just closing up this tour here. I need to touch base with the other clients here.
We'll finish this off with the plane. That was a tour of the Goxhill Tower.